I found out my son sold my lake house when a random contractor called me to ask where the main water shutoff valve was. Before I get into the details, let me know in the comments if you have ever trusted family with your finances, only to have it blow up in your face. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about setting hard boundaries. I am Regina Maxwell, 65 years old and a widow. My husband passed away 5 years ago, leaving me a comfortable life, a large primary residence in the suburbs, and my absolute favorite place on earth, a rustic, peaceful lake house up in the mountains. It was my sanctuary. A few years ago, trying to be a responsible parent, I added my 32-year-old son, Nathan, to the deed of the lake house. It was a simple estate planning move to avoid probate if anything happened to me. I never imagined it would become a weapon. "Who is this?" I asked the voice on the phone that Tuesday morning. "I'm the demo guy for the new owners," the man replied. "We're tearing out the old kitchen cabinets today." My heart stopped, but I didn't panic. I just grabbed my car keys. I drove 2 hours up the mountain, my mind racing through 100 different explanations. None of them made sense. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, a large dumpster sat on my lawn. Strangers were carrying out the oak dining table my husband built. I walked right up to the foreman. After a brief conversation and seeing his paperwork, the cold, hard truth settled in my chest. Nathan had used his legal standing on the deed to sell the property to a Cash for Homes LLC. He bypassed me entirely, taking a quick payout of $150,000 for a property worth twice that. He didn't consult me. He just took it. I didn't call him. I didn't cry. I got back in my car, gripped the steering wheel, and realized the son I raised was gone. I drove straight back to the city and walked into my bank. I sat across from the branch manager, a woman I had known for a decade, and asked her to pull up every account connected to my name. Nathan and I shared one joint checking account, mostly used for emergencies, and transferring money to help with his rent when he was younger. The $150,000 from the lake house sale wasn't there. He had routed the funds directly into a private account. He knew exactly what he was doing. Why did he need that exact amount? The answer was painfully obvious. Vanessa, Nathan's fiancée. Vanessa was a woman who treated life like a checklist of luxury experiences she felt entitled to. Since they got engaged, she had turned their upcoming wedding into a massive, escalating spectacle. Initially, I offered them $20,000 toward a modest ceremony. Vanessa had scoffed at the number, showing me a Pinterest board of grand ballrooms and custom floral arches. I sat in the quiet bank lobby and realized my son had traded my sanctuary, my memories and my peace of mind for a one-day party. He sold my safe haven to buy ice sculptures and imported champagne. Many mothers would have called their sons screaming, demanding answers, begging for an explanation. I didn't. If Nathan thought he was smart enough to pull this off behind my back, I was going to show him what real financial control looked like. "I need to make some changes today," I told the bank manager, pulling out my ID. I quietly removed myself as a guarantor on Nathan's luxury apartment lease. I canceled the joint credit cards he still occasionally used for business expenses. I logged into my phone provider and removed his and Vanessa's lines from my family plan. I didn't say a word to him. The real storm was coming, and I was going to be entirely prepared when it hit. Sunday evening, Nathan and Vanessa came over for our usual family dinner at my main house. This was a sprawling 4-bedroom property that my husband and I had paid off decades ago. Nathan had already hinted heavily that after the wedding, he and Vanessa wanted to move in here to save money for a house of their own, expecting me to downsize or just move into the guest wing. They walked through the front door carrying a stack of glossy wedding magazines. Vanessa dropped them on the kitchen island, immediately complaining about the caterer. "Can you believe they want an extra $10,000 just for the seafood tower?" she huffed, pouring herself a glass of my good wine. But Nathan handled it. He's been so amazing with the budget lately. Nathan avoided my eyes, suddenly very interested in his phone. Yeah, well, you only get married once, right? I observed them carefully while I stirred the pasta sauce. Neither of them looked guilty. They looked smug. They thought I was a clueless old woman who only visited the lake house twice a year anyway. They assumed I wouldn't notice the sale until after the wedding when it would be too late to do anything but forgive them. You two certainly found a lot of extra money recently. I noted calmly placing a bowl of salad on the table. $150,000 is a lot to spend on one evening. Nathan flinched, almost dropping his fork. Vanessa just waved her manicured hand dismissively. Oh, Nathan had some investments pay off. He's a great provider, Regina. We're even looking at custom Italian marble for the master bathroom here when we move in next month. I hope you don't mind, but the current tile is just so dated. She was planning renovations on my home while drinking my wine after my son stole my property. I just smiled, a tight, polite smile. I see. I didn't argue. I didn't kick them out. I let them finish their dinner. They had no idea they were sitting in a house that was no longer their safety net. The next morning, I made a phone call to a real estate broker who specialized in quiet, off-market sales. I want to sell the house, I told him. Cash buyer, fast closing. I don't want a for sale sign in the yard, and I don't want open houses. Within 4 days, he found a retired couple downsizing from an estate in California. They loved the neighborhood, loved the house, and made a cash offer that was exactly what I wanted. I signed the paperwork without a second thought. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly packing up my life. I hired a specialized moving company to come during the hours Nathan was at his office. I took the photo albums, my husband's favorite armchair, my jewelry, and the few antiques that mattered to me. I left the bulky dated furniture that Vanessa hated so much. I leased a beautiful modern 2-bedroom condominium in a high-rise downtown. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, a concierge, and most importantly, top-tier security. Nobody could get up the elevator without my explicit permission. Meanwhile, Nathan and Vanessa were completely consumed by their wedding prep. They were too busy tasting cake flavors and selecting custom linens to notice that my house was slowly emptying out. When Nathan texted me to ask why his credit card had been declined at the florist, I simply texted back, "I think you need to call the bank, Nathan. I'm auditing my accounts." He didn't push it. He just used his newly acquired lake house funds. He thought I was just being a frugal senior citizen. He didn't realize I was severing every single financial string attached to him. I was wrapping up my life, neatly tying a bow on it, and preparing to hand him the consequences of his own greed. The rehearsal dinner was held at an exclusive downtown steakhouse 2 nights before the wedding. I arrived on time wearing a new dress I had bought for myself, feeling lighter than I had in years. The private room was excessively decorated. Champagne flowed freely. Vanessa was wearing a white silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. Nathan was holding court at the head table, laughing loudly with his groomsmen playing the role of the wealthy, successful groom. I sat quietly near the back, watching the spectacle. The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. Every bite of steak, every clink of a crystal glass was paid for by the wood and stone of my grandfather's lake house. After dinner, Nathan had a few too many drinks. He stumbled over to my table, his face flushed. "Great party, right, Mom," he slurred, leaning heavily on the back of a chair. "Vanessa is so happy. This is exactly what she wanted." I looked up at him, my expression blank. "It is a very expensive party, Nathan. I hope you got exactly what you paid for." He waved his hand. "Money comes and goes. You gotta enjoy life." I stood up, picking up my purse. I looked him dead in the eye, dropping the polite facade. "How did you afford this, Nathan? And don't tell me about investments." I drove up to the lake house last week. I spoke to the contractor tearing out my kitchen. The color drained from his face for a split second. But then the alcohol and his own ego kicked back in. He glanced around to make sure Vanessa wasn't listening, then leaned in closer to me. He wasn't apologizing. He was calculating. He thought he had outsmarted me, and he wanted the credit. Nathan smirked. It was an ugly, entitled expression I had never seen on his face before. He crossed his arms, looking down at me. "Look, Mom, it's done," he whispered loudly. "My name was on the deed, too. I had the right to sell it. You barely went up there anyway. Vanessa needed this wedding, and I needed to make her happy. You stole my sanctuary for a party," I stated, clearly keeping my voice low so the other guests wouldn't hear. I didn't want a public scene. I wanted him to hear every word. He laughed, an actual, genuine chuckle of amusement. He raised his half-empty whiskey glass in a mocking toast. "Thanks for paying for the wedding, Mom. Look at it as an early inheritance." I just sped up the process. He felt entirely untouchable. He believed that because he was my only son, I would eventually forgive him. He assumed the big suburban house was still waiting for him. He thought he held all the cards. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slap him even though my hand twitched. I didn't shed a single tear. I just looked at this greedy, foolish boy I had raised, and I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a cold, empty curve of the lips that made his smirk falter just a fraction. "You're welcome, Nathan," I replied gently. I patted his cheek, feeling him stiffen. "Enjoy your big day. Oh, and make sure you check your mail tomorrow morning. I sent you a wedding gift." I turned around and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. I got into my car and drove straight to my new high-rise condo, leaving the suburbs and my ungrateful son entirely in the rearview mirror. Saturday morning, the day of the wedding. While Vanessa was likely surrounded by makeup artists and photographers, the local mail carrier was dropping a thick, certified envelope into Nathan's apartment mailbox. Inside that envelope were no lawsuits. There were no threats of police involvement or lawyers. I didn't need the legal system to teach my son a lesson. I just needed the truth. The envelope contained 3 things. First, a copy of the final closing documents for the main suburban house. The paperwork clearly showed that the property had been sold to new owners, the cash had cleared, and the keys had been handed over. The house he and Vanessa planned to move into on Monday no longer belonged to our family. Second, a neatly printed list of account closures. It detailed the cancellation of his auto insurance policy, which I had funded for a decade, the termination of his cell phone contract, and a notice from his apartment management confirming that since the guarantor me had withdrawn support for the upcoming renewal, he would need to provide proof of income that he did not possess or vacate within 30 days. Third, a single handwritten note on my personal stationery. "Nathan, you told me to look at the lake house as an early inheritance. I agree. The $150,000 you took is your final inheritance. Everything else, my accounts, the proceeds from the main house and my future, has been placed into an irrevocable trust for my own care and charities. You made your choice. Have a beautiful wedding." I poured myself a cup of premium coffee, sat by my floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and waited for the delivery confirmation on my phone. At 10:14 a.m., the notification popped up. Delivered. At 10:30 a.m., my phone started ringing. It was Nathan. I watched the screen light up, flash his picture, and go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, Vanessa called. Then Nathan again. Then a barrage of text messages flooded in. "Mom, what is this? You sold the house. Where are we supposed to live? Mom, pick up the phone. You can't do this today." I didn't respond. According to my old neighbor who I had befriended years ago, Nathan actually left his groomsmen at the hotel and drove in a panic to the suburban house. He arrived just in time to see the new owners directing a moving truck into the driveway. He tried to argue with them, demanding to get inside, but the new owner simply showed him the deed and threatened to call the police if he didn't get off their lawn. I can only imagine how his face froze in that moment. The reality must have hit him like a freight train. The $150,000 he stole wasn't free money. It was the absolute peak of what he would ever get from me. He had traded a massive paid-off suburban home, a lifetime of financial security, and a mother's love all for an ice sculpture, some caviar, and a custom dress for a woman who was about to realize she was marrying a broke man. He had rushed his inheritance, and now he had absolutely nothing left to fall back on. He was standing on the curb of his childhood home, completely locked out of his future. I put my phone on silent, tossed it onto the kitchen counter, and went out for a nice, long walk in the park. I did not attend the wedding. I didn't care what the guests thought, and I didn't care what lies Nathan and Vanessa spun to cover my absence. Later, a mutual family friend told me how the evening went. The venue was gorgeous, the food was spectacular, but the bride and groom looked physically ill. Nathan spent the entire reception checking his phone, sweating through his custom tuxedo. Vanessa forced tight, painful smiles for the photographer, but multiple guests overheard her loudly arguing with Nathan in the hallway near the restrooms. She had married him expecting to move into a multi-million-dollar property on Monday morning. She married him expecting me to continue funding their lifestyle. Instead, she was legally tied to a man who was about to be evicted from his apartment, had no car insurance, and had severed his only financial lifeline. They had to stand on the dance floor surrounded by $150,000 worth of flowers and lights, completely consumed by panic. The lavish party they stole from me became their own personal nightmare. I spent that evening at a quiet Italian restaurant near my new condo. I ordered a beautiful plate of pasta, a glass of expensive red wine, and I toasted to myself. I mourned the loss of my lake house, yes. It hurt deeply. But I realized that the lake house had purchased my freedom. It had shown me exactly who my son was before I made the fatal mistake of leaving my entire estate in his careless hands. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor who had just cleaned house. It has been 6 months since the wedding. Nathan and Vanessa did not get a fairy tale ending. Without my financial backing, they couldn't renew their luxury apartment lease. They had to downsize to a cramped one-bedroom unit on the outskirts of the city. Vanessa had to return her leased luxury SUV because Nathan couldn't afford the payments without my safety net. The stress of actual adult responsibility has apparently made their young marriage miserable. They tried to visit me once. They found out where my new condo was through a relative and showed up in the lobby demanding to be let up. The concierge called my unit. I took the elevator down to the lobby and met them past the security desk. Nathan looked exhausted. Vanessa looked furious. "You can't just cut us out like this." Mom Nathan pleaded, trying to look pathetic. "We're family. You made a financial decision, Nathan," I said calmly, standing tall. "You decided the lake house was yours to sell. I decided the rest of my assets were mine to protect. We are completely even." Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, stopping her instantly. "Do not come here again. You have the wedding you wanted. Go enjoy your marriage." I turned and walked back to the elevators, leaving them standing there with nothing to say. I am happier now than I have been in years. I travel. I read. I enjoy my quiet mornings, without worrying about ungrateful children treating me like a bank. I set a boundary, and I guarded it. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: never let anyone, not even your own children, mistake your quiet kindness for weakness. Thank you for listening, and remember to protect your peace at all costs.